Hi class, and welcome to the second PowerPoint audio presentation for LP. And it's one of the more interesting chapters, I think, in the text. It covers ethical, social, and political issues in e-commerce, of which there are many. In keeping with the format that I've established, here's your second question for your seminar assessment. There are two TED-Ed videos noted below, recommended for viewing. I would recommend you view both of them, but what I do want you to do is watch one or the other and then write a recap around what the video is about and your take on what you believe to be the germane topics at hand. The first talks about search. Really interesting presentation. It's only about 11 minutes long. And then the second one is about why we need privacy on the internet. Two really good videos. I've used them both in other classes. As I noted, there's many issues, ethical issues, privacy issues, and such that are raised by the internet and the web. And the book does, I think, a really nice job of organizing those and discussing them in detail. And I like these four major categories that they identify of information rights, property rights, governance, and safety issues and welfare. So I'm just going to talk about some of those in sort of a generic perspective or take. And of course, the internet can enable new crimes. I had a TED-Ed video on the last slide that you might be interested in watching. It talks about the dark internet, that part of the internet where a lot of illegal activities take place, and how it threatens different social values is another topic, and how can it affect our environment in general, our social environment and the environment of our homes, and the natural environment for that matter, and all the various ways that it takes to support it. So the book talks about a number of these issues, and are all these issues actually in detail. I just selected some of them. The issue of privacy, again, this is the TED-Ed video that I noted on the slide earlier, and there is an interesting issue, I think, of how much privacy we can expect from the companies that we share it with, particularly issues around our behavior and our thoughts and such. And I think at least a couple of generations have really given up their privacy to the companies. I think that's just the way it's going to be from here on out, and I think they, for the most part, have done it unwittingly. And there's lots of positive things to be gained from it. I think, I can't remember who it was, but maybe Virgie had talked about in one of her discussions that she thought it was pretty neat that by selecting certain things she got related promotions of germane, helpful information around products. There is a concern, though, that the government should not rather have access to our private information at the same level that companies necessarily do. On the other hand, you might be interested, and I think your book mentioned this, that the government is the #1 user of information on these social networking sites. They'd be able to do that. Again, most databases are developed initially for one particular use. but rarely do they end up being used for one particular use. So this TED-Ed video is really a good one and sobering, I think, in terms of what companies as well as the government can know about our behavior. As far as the government is concerned, we are protected in the use of the internet by two of our amendments, the first being the freedom of speech, and basically it would imply that we should be able to say what we want to say without having, a big brother sort of watching and listening and then judging. And then the Fourth Amendment deals with unreasonable search and seizure, and the application of that would be related to what I just said. Should they be able to search that information and judge what we say and deem us a threat based on that? Is freedom of speech on the internet any different than freedom of speech in our home or at a party or anything else? Net neutrality has been a recent issue. Net neutrality fundamentally says that the internet should be available to everyone through different sources, all priced the same, that certain people or certain entities shouldn't be able to price access differently. Manipulated viewing, Comcast is noted in the text as slowing slowing the access to data at different speeds. They also have just, I think, a terrible thing that they try to do in their advertising, that if you ever subscribe to Comcast and Xfinity, it puts a bug on your router or your computer so that it becomes a micro hotspot. And long story short, if you're trying to log in, you'll get Comcast will co-op your access to the internet and send you ads to become a customer of theirs, and it's really hard to take it off your computer. There's an there's an issue of internet sales tax that's still ongoing. Should there be a national sales tax, perhaps, or how do states control the taxing of sales that go across state lines? There's issues of trademarks, copyrights, and patents. They take many kind of interesting forms. In the beginning of the internet, just like with 800 numbers, there was a really entrepreneurial brother sister that had made a lot of money when 800 numbers started to become common by sitting down and simply figuring out words that captured, or numbers that captured certain words, like 1-800-Flowers. And they tied those up and then turned around and sold them to the companies that would have a use for those particular digital sorts of words. Many people tried to do the same thing when the net started, and they had to put a stop to it for the same reason. People were tying up like 1-800-Playboy, and they weren't Playboy magazine. I don't know if Playboy is 7 letters or not, but I guess it is. But you cannot do that. What said was, after those went to court, and the court decided that if that name, that URL, as it was noted, did not have application to your business, then it was sort of automatically trademarked or copyrighted by the companies that otherwise would, like Playboy. Links, web links, that's another thing that initially companies would put unauthorized links on their websites, or try to treat their website as a portal and make unauthorized links to other websites because it's so easy to do. So they might have a page where you could link to Disneyland, Disney World, or Disney's website, and other websites, and that's become regulated and prohibited around copyright and trademark law. That you can't do that without the express consent of those companies. There's still some interesting, I wouldn't call it infringing, but people capitalizing on names that can't be trademarked, like White House. I actually really have never tested it, but I know for some time, and it may still be the case, that if you search White House or whitehouse.com, it used to take you to a pornography site. So those kinds of things are far more difficult to do. Gambling is a hot item, of course, on the internet, and this concern around an ongoing concern around children and companies' access to children on the internet. For a number of different reasons. Your text started out in this chapter with a really interesting discussion of Google's dilemmas around privacy in Europe, and this issue in Europe of the right to be forgotten. And the question becomes, can individuals ask for old, ungermane, inaccurate information to be taken out of or off of websites so that people aren't unduly portrayed? And the answer by the courts was yes, they can. It's interesting to see if challenges in this country are upheld in similar manner. I think a hot item in the future is going to be these issues of profiling, constructing dynamics or cross sections of individuals based on their use and their searches on the internet. Most of us assume that in searching the web, I mean, we know it's not anonymous anymore, but it still feels like it. And one of the things that Google, I think I mentioned this before, has tried to do is buy a company called Acxiom, ACXIOM. And Acxiom has been around a long time, and they've collected data over the past 4 to 5 decades. And so they know what life stage you're in. They keep a huge database. They're located in Arkansas. Google, on the other hand, recognizes you not by name or until recently, but rather just by your IP address. They've saved every search you've ever made on the internet. And what buying Acxiom would have allowed them to do had they been able to go through with it, which they were not, they would have been able to put the two databases together and use algorithms that would be able to take your name and address out of the Acxiom database and determine who you were by your profiling that both of the programs can do, Acxiom versus theirs. They were disallowed doing this, but they simply went around it by offering phone service. And so when you search for such things on the web, not only do they know you by your IP address, but you've given up your name and address when you use them as a phone service. So it's interesting what some of what some of the topics are going to be going forward. I put this a really great short little video on, that's a TED-Ed video again, on how stores track you, and it has good application to e-commerce, but how they track your activities in a store, and it sort of defines how the future retail is going to